All right, so good morning. Be sure to do your daily check in for attendance. So, some announcements for today. You know that we have tutoring on Mondays at 8:15 a.m. Be sure to do your homework and submit it before midnight. And we do have a review day tomorrow, so make sure to compile problems that you want to review and add them to the Google Classroom assignment under week 11 that says review day. You do have a quiz on Friday, so that review day, make sure to add those problems that you want answered or would like to review. Go add them to the review day for tomorrow. And the Check Your Understandings Explained are posted for lessons 4.1, days 1 and 2. So for today's lesson, our learning target, what we would like to hit and understand and explain. So explain how undercoverage, non-response, question wording, and other aspects of a sample survey can lead to bias. So we're going to be looking at and identifying what's wrong with the surveys that are in our document for today. So what's wrong with these surveys? Let's get started. So number one, the mayor of Springfield is interested in finding out the average age of people in the city. He obtains a list of all of the landline telephones in the city and then contacts a simple random sample of 300 people. He uses the data from the sample to estimate the average age of all the people in the city. What is wrong with this survey? Go ahead, read it over. What do you think what's wrong? All right, so if you notice in the second sentence, he is obtaining a list of all the people who have landline telephones. So he's only contacting people with landline phones. So the people who don't own landline phones aren't necessarily included in this survey. So, part B, do you think the mayor will over or underestimate the true mean age of people in Springfield and why? All right. So if you said overestimate, I would agree. People who have landline phones are usually old, so we're overestimating the true mean age of people in Springfield. So this in this problem number one for this survey, this is an example of, and this is good to add to your notes, under coverage. So, under coverage, the definition for that, which we'll also talk about and write in our big ideas, but under coverage is when some members, in this case, the people who don't have landline phones, so when some members of the population cannot or are less likely to be chosen. So, the people who do not have landline phones aren't included. So this is an example of under coverage. So vocabulary word, add that to your notes. And let's go on to number two. So number two, the administration at a school wants to know the proportion of students that did all of their homework last night. They select a simple random sample of 100 students and send an email to each of them asking if they did all of their homework last night. Of the 40 responses, 36 of the students said that they did all of their homework last night, and they let us know 90%. So what is wrong with this survey? So I see a couple holes in the survey. So only 40 of the students responded to this. Another one that you could have seen here is some students might lie and just say they did their homework. Now, part B. Do you think the administration will over or underestimate the true proportion of students who did all of their homework last night? Why? So, they definitely will overestimate for sure. And the reason being is students could lie because the admin's asking, or maybe they might not respond if they didn't do it, or maybe their parents forced them. Who knows? But possibly the students could lie. So this leads to an overestimation of the true proportion of students who did all of their homework last night. So there are a couple of vocabulary words here. So in part A, we said only 40 out of the 100 students responded. That specifically is an example of non-response. So non-response is a vocabulary word, add it to your notes, is when an individual is selected to be in a sample, but chooses not to participate or is unable to be reached. So in this case, the 60 students who didn't respond, maybe they didn't check their email, maybe they chose not to participate. So this is an example of non-response. The one below it, where students might lie and say they did their homework, but when they really didn't, this messes with our data. So this is what we call response bias. All right. So be sure to add those two vocab words to your notes, and you will see them again when we go over the big ideas. But number 3, Boy Scout Peter M. wants to know the proportion of people in his neighborhood who support the Boy Scouts. He takes a random sample of 30 homes and visits them dressed in his uniform. A. What is wrong with this survey? Well, we can see that he ends up in the second sentence, he says that he takes a random sample of 30 homes and visits them dressed in his uniform. Well, he's influencing his responses. So people may not want to tell him that they don't support the Boy Scouts because he is a Boy Scout. So do you think Peter will over or underestimate the true proportion of his neighbors who support the Boy Scouts and why? So in this case, they will overestimate the true proportion of his neighbors who support the Boy Scouts because people may say they support Boy Scouts, even if they really don't, because Peter is a Boy Scout. So in this case, this is definitely an example of response bias. He's influencing his responses, or his responses. So response bias. So let's go ahead and go over the big ideas. So the first one I want to hit is undercoverage. When some members of the population cannot or are less likely to be chosen. So for an example, we saw that in the first survey. They were only contacting people with landline phones, when in fact, maybe people who don't have the people who don't have landline phones aren't surveyed. So this is an example of undercoverage. The next one is non-response, when an individual is selected to be in a sample, but chooses not to participate or isn't reached. So just keep in mind, this is different from voluntary response sampling, going out and gathering data, and having people volunteer to respond. This is different. We're not sampling, but non-response is just an individual, when an individual is selected to be in a sample, but chooses not to participate. So keep in mind, those are two different things. One more, response bias. So pattern of inaccurate responses. So we saw that in number 2, when students might lie and say they did their homework even though they didn't. And we also saw it in number 3, when Boy Scout Peter M. dressed up and in his Boy Scouts uniform and went around asking people to participate, and they don't want to lie to him. So that's an example of response bias. And that is it.